Welcome back to another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and our first impressions with the latest games releasing. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today we're taking a look at UFC 5, the latest game in the long-running combat sports franchise. Been 3 years since the last one, and you may have heard me say this in a previous video, but the fact that there is not a UFC every single year, like FIFA or NHL, this should be a more evolutionary step for the series compared to what we see with other sports titles. That's what I expected, actually. Maybe that was foolhardy because it's not what we got. There is a pretty noticeable time gap between this and the previous game, but this feels like a yearly game. Only minor changes really applied to anything. The fighting, which I'm gonna say, and I believe I said this in the last time I even mentioned these games, I think in the run-up to new games releasing this month, but these are good games in terms of how they feel. The fighting is satisfying, enjoyable, etc., and it's also just the same. And that goes for everything else. The modes, the unlockables, the roster even is pretty much the same as UFC 4. Now there's some minor updates here and there, but not what you would expect considering it's been, like I said, 3 years. If you're just getting into the series, this is your first UFC game, that's not going to matter a lot. It's the best version of this you're going to play. But if you played UFC 4 or you were into the series before even that, there's just going to be a lack of any real substantial evolution here. And that, I think, is going to lead to disappointment. It's unfortunate because, again, this is a series with a lot of potential. Combat, very satisfying, always has been. And I'll break down the changes and alterations in a minute, but for now, let's talk about that. UFC 5, like the games before it, they're all about the combat. 2 men, 2 women, enter a ring, beat the hell out of each other with punches, kicks, elbows, takedowns, and submission. Right? It's not perfect, but I'd say that UFC kind of functions like a spiritual successor to Fight Night, but instead of a boxing ring, you're in the MMA octagon. As with the previous games, the fighting is excellent, responsive, hard-hitting, really satisfying when you get the hang of it, and it's also pretty intuitive when you're talking about the standing game. When things go to the ground, it gets a little complicated, but while you're standing up, it's one of those games that takes a few minutes to get and is also at the same time a worthwhile challenge to master. There's a few improvements to the standing game. They're kind of for show because the main game is relatively untouched. The violence may be a little more cranked up, more realistic compared to UFC 4. Fighters can get serious cuts, welts, black eyes, swollen faces. Can get pretty gnarly after an especially competitive fight. This is something that EA Vancouver's clearly proud of. They claim there's over 64,000 possible facial damage combinations, so that's obvious variation. Depending on the damage, either that's a negative effect or maybe not. Visually, it's super impressive, and the way damage can build up and make fighters weaker and more vulnerable to certain attacks goes a long way in making the in-ring action feel more real. To go along with this, they've added a new way to end a match with the doctor's stoppage, where if your fighter takes too much damage to any given area, then a doctor will appear and throw in the towel. It's not uncommon to see in an actual UFC fight, so it's a good addition that adds some authenticity to the fights, and it's something that'll happen so rarely that it doesn't really matter. You're still going to be seeing mostly knockouts, technical knockouts, and regular old ref stoppages. The only reason I'm even bringing it up is because EA is really trying to sell the new doctor stoppages as a marquee new feature. They think it's so noteworthy that the game literally starts with one. That's how big of a deal they seem to think this is, but you're really just going to forget about it after the initial bout. It doesn't come into play a whole lot. All the new damage modeling effects are, a significant upgrade to the visuals, but they don't make a big impact on the gameplay. The ground game is one of the game's more controversial features, the series' more controversial features, I should say. It's seen some developments, but it's not the total reimagining that it sorely needs. In contrast to the standing game, anytime you go ground in UFC 5, you're bombarded with confusing systems that are not intuitive to anyone. If they're intuitive to you, I assume you often think of that G.I. Joe cartoon where the guy goes, "Hey, kid, I'm a computer. Stop all the downloading." And you go, "Yep, I know how that feels." Insert lady doing math gif. Am I right? Yeah, no, games shouldn't feel like that. Yes, you can learn and understand it, but it's a mess. It needs to be completely overhauled. And UFC 5 made some minor tweaks and called it a day. And it's not even that the ground game stuff is necessarily bad. It's kind of an essential essential part of the identity of UFC and mixed martial arts. And to a certain extent, I can appreciate how complex it is and how they've tried to accurately simulate the tactics of a fight when it does go to the mat. But the standing game and the ground game feel like different games. Like the fact that I'm talking about it this way, as opposed to two elements of one type of fighting, UFC fighting, mixed martial arts fighting, as, not a UFC fighter. I mean, I guess they probably know a lot more about it and can talk about it this way. I maybe shouldn't see them as two different things. But in this game, I really do. Still, it's disjointed. Even if it's on a technical level still pretty impressive, they were able to model all these different moves, mountains, holds, and have them flow into each other pretty seamlessly. That's great and technically impressive, but it's not necessarily pleasing, enjoyable, or intuitive. I mean, the changes they've made are minor, but I will also say they are appreciated nonetheless. Transitions are sped up. They keep things moving a lot better. They've completely removed the mini games when applying submission holds. Makes submissions so much less annoying. Also makes them more effective, to be frank, because instead of having to do some tedious mini game to get somebody to tap out, now you lower the submission meter, which depending on the fighter can be actually kind of easy. This has the overall effect of making submissions a much more viable option for ending a fight. Not quite as flashy as a knockout, but for ending a fight quickly, there's nothing better than a good armbar. And that's pretty much it for the gameplay changes. Seriously, when you get in the ring, the game feels almost exactly the same as UFC 4. Looks, a fair amount better most of the time, but feels pretty much the same. It is a current gen exclusive, so no PS4, no Xbox One version, and that you'd think that would mean truly next gen visuals. And yes, again, I want to stress the game looks better and sometimes even legitimately impressive, especially during the entrances with some of the more realistically depicted fighters. But even there, it's kind of a mixed bag with who got the most love from the dev team. Like, some guys look almost photorealistic and others don't. If the fighter's a champion or a former champion, they look good. And if they're not, they're kind of reminiscent of Create a Fighter. The entrances are where the improved models and lighting really do shine, but there's still a lot of moments of ugliness here and there. Bruce Buffer looks weird, like a marionette on a string type thing. They're shot in every championship bout where they show his completely blank face while his mouth moves like a puppet. Looks so bad. And you see it a lot. There's also Dana White's dead-eyed stare. You're forced to see at the conclusion of these things. Basically, anyone who's not an actual fighter looks at least a little wrong in this game. When you're using some of the top build fighters, game looks pretty good. But if you're playing against created characters, they look almost identical to the previous game. Overall, visual step up, but so much of the same stuff just ported over from UFC 4. So it's impossible not to see the similarities. So much of the game is just the same game. There are these new cinematic KOs which trigger at the end of the match, and they can be pretty satisfying. I'm not going to say that this is a bad addition. I rather like it even. When you hit the perfect knockout, seeing a replay of your opponent just get blasted in the jaw looks and sounds awesome. Most of the time, these cinematic match enders look great, but there's also an occasional one that looks a little weird. Get a weird camera angle that doesn't actually show you what happens, or the hit ends up kind of awkward. So the super cinematic camera dramatically showing your opponent just sort of falling over doesn't really have the intended effect. I do want to say this is the exception rather than the rule. It mostly looks very good, and I mostly really like this feature. But in a way, it does kind of underscore the fact that gameplay is mostly the same. Visuals are better, but not as much better as they should be with a generation leap and 3 years. There are new modes, but maybe I should say mode. There's only one genuinely new mode to speak of. It's called Fight Contracts. It gets top billing on the menu, so you'd think it'd be a big deal, but it's kind of a basic daily challenge mode that has a rotating selection of fights that update on a schedule. Some of them are hard, some are easy. You get rewarded accordingly with UFC coins, which can be spent in the in-game store for rewards. Nothing special. It's at least pretty straightforward and gives you an excuse to try out different fighters and difficulty modes, but there's just not much else to it. And as you'd expect, the rewards, kind of paltry too. Just 100 coins for attempting a challenge, and then often 100 more for winning. So I get paid the same amount to win that I do to just do it at all. most of the stuff in the store, which by the way, can also of course be purchased for real world money, most of it tends to go for as low as 500 coins. The highest it goes is 9,000 coins. So I mean, you want to unlock some stuff with fake money, with ultimate fighting coins, you're gonna have to fight. Fight contracts is really just that starting point in the way the game pushes live service content. There's rotating challenges, a rotating store that changes out unlockables on a daily and weekly basis. Battle Pass, it's called a punch card. It's functionally the same as a Battle Pass. It expires in 2 weeks. All these constant crap, timed events, whatever. It's meant to push some FOMO and keep people playing for a long time. And I don't really understand who this is working on anymore. It's got to be working on somebody because companies keep doing it. It must be making them money, but like who? I don't know anybody, and I don't just know people who are like professional game playing monetization understanders. I know a lot of normies as well. I don't know anybody who plays this stuff. Maybe that's just me. I know I'm complaining a lot about that. It's just one more game like this. It's also hardly the worst regarding this stuff. But if there's one change that actually feels worse than UFC 4, it's just the addition of this crap. The online multiplayer has actually seen improvements, which for certain players is maybe the most significant change because UFC 4's online multiplayer is kind of threadbare. The place that's gotten the most love is the career mode. It works similar to the offline career mode, except you're fighting other people, and it's one of the game's highlights. It's annoying having to create not just 1, but 4 new fighters to start this mode up for the first time. Seriously, you can't even import ones you've played it from other modes. I don't know why, but once that particular hurdle gets jumped, tons of fun. Not even joking, like it's probably the best way to experience UFC 5. The high point for the series is just that the mountain it climbed to get to this peak is not exactly a real mountain. It's kind of a very little hill. It's better. I'll also say the matchmaking, actually skill-based, makes the multiplayer a lot more fun. Absolutely. Didn't spend a lot of time here, but the fights I did have were really, really fun. I want to emphasize really how enjoyable these fights can be. Probably the high point because they are definitely better than AI fights. There are a few more modes. Fight Now, just standard fight mode. Career is kind of weird. It's where I spent most of my time in UFC 4. It was fun. It was well designed. And it's more about simulation than story, which if you've played any recent WWE games, you know that's a good choice. That's a right move. This game tries to split the difference, though. Your creative fighter has a voice now. You get 4 options for men or women, which is an improvement, but that means your character is actually going to talk. So all it really results in is the addition of some pretty embarrassing cutscenes. We're talking WWE 2K territory here, especially at the start where you guys getting all hyped up about getting the call from the Dana White and like visiting the UFC version of the Performance Center and fanboying over a fighter they brought in to do some middling voiceover work. Stuff like this sucks. Like, I don't know why these sports games always have to make your career mode guy such a dork. They always have to have this absurd reverence for the brand. I mean, I can't believe I'm really in the UFC TM. Can't wait to put on my crypto.com t-shirt because they financially support the UFC. Oh my God, it's lame. And in comparison to the straightforward career mode presentation in UFC 4, which mostly didn't have this kind of crap, it's a big step down, which is weird because otherwise it's almost exactly the same. Seriously, the entire tutorial is almost beat for beat the same as UFC 4. It's a little slightly updated remake of that mode than an actual new mode. At least in the WWE games, there's a new story in every year's career mode. It's embarrassing and bad, but it's new. Like they say, you know what? We're not going to rest on our laurels. We're going to find some new way to embarrass ourselves. Which, I mean, is mostly unintentional. It's not really what they're going for, but they're going for something. That's kind of the point I'm making here. It's pretty much exactly the same up to and including all the mechanics where you set up a fight camp for so many weeks before the fight, then allocate your time between sparring to get in peak physical shape and doing promotions for the fight to increase your fame and payout. It's a good career mode that has enough sim stuff to stay interesting, and it's also not too bogged down in the menus to get in the way of the actual fights. It's a great place to start as a newbie. The sparring sections do work as excellent tutorials. The problem is that this was all in the previous game. The loading screens, yeah, they're faster, but the presentation, layout, objectives, just everything, it's almost exactly the same. The only new thing here are the cutscenes, which, as I explained, don't help. Like, at least they brought back Coach Davis, who still manages to insert a little charisma into the career mode for the brief moments he appears. When I first saw the ad copy touting the fan favorite Coach Davis was coming back, I kind of scoff, but I'm glad he's here. There's got to be somebody to counterbalance how much of a charisma black hole your guy is. Overall, it's a game that I've been enjoying playing, but you might notice from the tone that it's mostly because I got a free code from EA. If I had dropped $70, I think I'd be pretty disappointed in it. It's been 3 years since the last UFC game, so this shouldn't be a yearly upgrade or the equivalent of one. If you've played UFC 4, this is that with a new coat of paint and a few like mostly benign live service features tacked on. I don't like live service features, so I'm not going to ever call them good, but they're far from the worst, I guess. Which put that on the back of the game to sell it, right? I guess the live service features aren't the worst. What a selling point. If you haven't played a UFC game before, there's plenty to like here. The combat is excellent. The visuals can be pretty impressive at times. But even with the addition of new modes and features, the game feels pretty bare bones. The creative fighter, not very intuitive. It's just a big slow list of sliders and the clothing options are limited to say the most. Online is improved. It's mostly limited, though, to a single mode. And the live service crap, it feels half-baked. And it's live service crap. It's annoying. Also, the roster is kind of bizarre. It seems like it's mostly holdovers from previous years, and it's missing some notable new fighters. 3 years is a long time in the world of MMA, but you don't really feel like 3 years has passed between 4 and 5 in terms of roster. They're still trying to attract a more casual audience with their pre-order characters. There's Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, and they all feel weird as hell to play in the octagon. They do not fit their obvious gimmicks. In fact, most of the updates mainly feel like gimmicks. The new damage modeling is probably the most significant change, and it does look good, and it makes the fights appear more hard-hitting and violent than ever. It's a cosmetic change. I know in video game development, 3 years isn't exactly what it used to be, but more should be expected here. If you're new, or like a total diehard who has to follow the updated roster changes, there's plenty to like here, but as somebody who played UFC 4, enjoyed it, and, got my money's worth out of it, I don't really want to say UFC should be seen as innovating enough for a $70 asking price. That's a lot of money for a game that feels like the same game with a couple more things. But what do you think? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Game Ranks.